Welcome, and thank you for joining us for an artist talk with Rafael Lozano-Hemmer in conjunction with the premiere of his most ambitious installation in the Pulse series to date, Pulse Topology, and Kemper Museum of Contemporary Art's largest technology-based immersive installation ever presented. My name is Erin Jedgetz, Director of Curatorial Affairs at Kemper Museum. Lozano-Hemmer was born in Mexico City in 1967 and is based in Montreal, Canada, where he earned a Bachelor of Science in Physical Chemistry from Concordia University and now directs Antimodular Research Studio. He was the first artist to represent Mexico at the Venice Biennale in 2007 and has had solo exhibitions at the Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, D.C., MUAC Museum in Mexico City, and the Musée des Arts Contemporains in Montreal, and the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney. His work is in many respected collections, including MoMA, Guggenheim, Museo del Barrio in New York, and the Tate and Science Museum in London, CIFO in Miami, JUMEX and MUAC in Mexico City, SF MoMA in San Francisco, among many others. Lozano-Hemmer was recently appointed to the board of directors for New York's Public Art Fund and was given the Governor General's Award in Canada. I've had the great pleasure of working with Rafael in the past, and to be able to realize such an amazing and literally heartfelt installation at Kemper Museum is something we're very proud of. This exhibition came together with the always supportive Antimodular Studio in Montreal. Rafael's team of Stefan, Karine, and Gabrielle have been wonderful to work with along this journey. I'd also like to express my thanks to the installation team of staff, contract, and volunteer individuals who worked so diligently on this project for several weeks to make it happen. You can see it behind me here in action. Kemper Museum would like to thank Jack and Karen Holland for their support of the Visiting Artist Program. Their generosity makes it possible for Kemper Museum to continue to have thoughtful and engaging programs in conjunction with our exhibitions and projects. Thank you to our Kemper Museum docents who offer their time and energy in interpreting the exhibitions and the permanent collection for our visitors. Underwriting for the docent program is generously provided by the family of Mary Beth Smith. This exhibition has been generously supported by the Enid and Crosby Kemper Foundation and the R.C. Crosby Kemper Trust Foundation, National Endowment for the Arts, and the Missouri Arts Council. Lead corporate sponsor is Evergy, and our premier and sustaining sponsors are Kansas City University, Mass Medical Storage, and Tom and Ruthie Reinhardt. A warm thank you to Kemper Museum members whose support of the museum make it possible for our exhibitions and programs to remain free. Visit our website to become a member today. We are honored to have Colleen Duke, Senior Foreign Policy and Diplomacy Service Officer from the Consulate General of Canada in Chicago, who supported this artist talk in part, to say a few words on behalf of the exhibition and the consulate.
Good afternoon. My name is Colleen Duke, and I am one of the Senior Foreign Policy and Diplomacy Services Officers at the Consulate General of Canada in Chicago. We are so pleased to see the Kemper Museum bring the art of Rafael Lozano-Hemmer to the heart of the Midwest. Pulse Topology's unique technological innovation is yet another reminder of the importance of human connection. It is particularly poignant after the separation during the past 15 months of this tragic pandemic. Pulse Topology also vividly displays how technology can connect us in unique ways. The Consulate General is happy to support this virtual talk, and we look forward to the opportunity to see Mr. Lozano-Hemmer's work in person in the future. Our thanks to the Kemper Museum staff for their efforts to bring Pulse Topology to Kansas City.
Thank you so much to Colleen and to the Consulate General of Canada. And without further delay, please join me in welcoming Rafael Lozano-Hemmer.
Thank you so much, Erin. Thank you, Kemper Museum. Thank you, Canadian Consulate. Thank you, supporters. Hello, Kansas City. I am so excited to present a brand new project that we've been working on in the studio for a really long time. And unfortunately, I can't be in Kansas City enjoying it with you because of here in Canada, we still have closed borders, and so it was impossible to come down. But we've managed to work with a wonderful team at the Kemper Museum to develop this piece. First here in Montreal, ship it there, and then have it installed with some of our supervision remotely. But we're very excited that this kind of hybrid, two teams, two countries work together to bring you what we consider is a really special artwork. In this presentation, I'm going to go very, very quickly about the concept of using biometrics in art. How can the artwork sense and feel and see and hear the public, the visitor, and react in such a way that the content of the artwork is fundamentally linked to participation of the public. And I'll show some examples of the past from the series of Pulse works that have been activated by the heartbeats of participants. And then I'm going to show you some never before seen footage that Aaron and Will just took minutes ago so that we can look together at this brand new work called Pulse Topology, which we opened today. So I'll start by sharing my screen real quick. And can you confirm that you can see this? We start with acknowledgments. I work in a studio that has 16 full-time people. Half of us are scientists. I have a chemistry degree. We have engineers, programmers, and so on. We also have artists and architects and industrial designers. This team is changed over COVID. So some of these names are no longer there. They're former colleagues. Some new ones will be updated shortly. So my apologies to some of my studio team that are not represent graphic. But to me, what's important about this is to say that though we work in the visual arts, we associate more with performing arts. We like the idea that, say I'm the director, but if there is a lighting designer or a composer or actors or set designers, that they are acknowledged too. And so in particular, I want to stop in Stefan Schultz. He's the head of R&D at the studio. Stefan worked feverishly to program from the ground up a brand new control system for the Pulse Topology installation, which is based in a contactless sensor to extract heartbeats without you needing to touch any device. And that was, of course, important for social distancing and for COVID. Of course, Karine Charbonneau, the head of exhibitions, was critical, as she always is, in bringing this show to Kemper. And I want to thank both of them and the rest of my colleagues for putting together this project under, the duress that is COVID. I want to mention before I also show this that we are so thankful for the work that Erin Žižek did. We've been working with her for a very long time. I met her first in Savannah, Georgia, in a project that was a Pulse project, but not as ambitious as this one. We also want to very quickly thank Jade and Sandy, Elizabeth, Regan, Paul, Luis, Neil, Dave, Amanda, Graham, and in particular as well, we want to thank William Toning, because William has been very patient with us as we give him a very complex work that has never been installed before. And he masterfully helped us install the work remotely. So real quick, this is me in 2006. I still had hair and I was in, and this is my heartbeat being extracted by this sensor that I'm holding. It's a sensor similar to what you might find at a gym. And as I hold on to the sensor, my heartbeat gets recorded, looped, and put in a light bulb in this massive old 19th century factory in Puebla. Here comes a second participant. This woman, you can see her heartbeat is different in heart rate, but also the attack on the filament is different. And when she releases, her recording goes to the very first light bulb in the exhibition hall and pushes mine one position down. Here comes my friend who drinks a lot of Red Bull. What does Red Bull do to your blood? Boom, 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 boom. Speeds it up. And again, as he pushes everybody before us, we just keep moving as the room gets populated. Here's the curator in this artwork. His name is Priamo Lozada. He thinks we're going to electrocute everybody. So this is what happens inside the heartbeat of a curator. And then once 100 people participated in the show, you were, as you walked around, surrounded by the heartbeats of the past 100 participants. This piece is currently in the collection of MoMA in New York City and Jumex in Mexico and here in Montreal at the Musée d'Art Contemporain. It's been shown many times, like at the Venice Biennale, at the first Mexican official Mexican pavilion in 2007. So this work started something. It started this desire to make visible the vital signs that actually keep us alive. We've done many different versions of this kind of work. This one's called Pulse Spiral, and it's the one that installation of this was where I met Aaron the first time. And this one's a three-dimensional spiral phyllotaxis 400 light bulb chandelier that the new heartbeats push the previous ones up one position. And the idea is to concentrate as much as possible of this biometric information into one organic shape, sort of presented with Fermat's equations of 137.5 is the golden number to distribute points in space. You see that in many natural systems. And so the work that you're going to see is, in fact, borrowing from these two precedents, which are started almost 20 years ago, and create what we think is an expression of this desire to visualize vital signs in a way that is immersive and effective. To show you a few more of the iterations of this Pulse series, we did the Pulse Spark in Madison Square Park. This time, instead of light bulbs, we have 200 spotlights, theatrical spotlights, which illuminate the perimeter of Madison Square Park's central oval lawn. And as you hold on to this, gradually you start taking over all 200 light beams, and the spotlights show your heartbeat amplified for all to see to an urban scale. As you release the sensor, same idea, you record your heartbeat, and all the previous participants get pushed down one position. In a way, the oldest participations are erased, and in a way, it brings us back to this idea of memento mori, of remembering that we're in the planet only for a little bit of time. So these heartbeats are constantly being recycled and added to. And one of the things that I love about working in public space is that you're creating an opportunity for people to spend time in public space in activities other than shopping. They're just basically hanging out with their very own data, their very own biometric data on view, creating a concert or creating almost like a fountain of light that has no beginning, has no end, it has no proscenium. It's just that. It's immersion. It's the idea of having a relationship with each other, with our city, and creating a symbolic representation of our ephemeral time in the planet. So this is what I find radical in public spaces, when people do nothing. They just hang out. And especially after COVID, it's important to create the sense of re-embodiment of public space. How do we bring our bodies back in dialogue with the technologies that we've been using to connect to each other? This idea of Zoom that we're doing right now has been, of course, a godsend, but at the same time, we all yearn for that connection, for that social interaction. You see the sensor in there. There's no way we could use a sensor like that during COVID, because we are very concerned about the virus. And we were thinking, is there a way that we can detect heartbeats at a distance? And of course, we found one way to do that. The last one I'll show you in the series is this piece which we made for the Guggenheim pre-opening in Abu Dhabi. It's same idea, you guys. It's the searchlights, this time being controlled by the same gym-like sensor. Except in this case, we added sound. And so you can hear the participants' heartbeat, but you can also see that the shape that the searchlights are pointed at vary with each and every participant. And that's because we're measuring not just heart rate, also systolic and diastolic activity, and then beaming out up in the sky with pattern for every person that tries the piece. These searchlights can be seen from a 10-mile radius. And so it's a way to bring people into an area with that sense of intimacy. These lights normally are used for fascist spectacles or for anti-aircraft surveillance or for looking at for Mexicans at the border. Here, they're used in a more bottom-up way. How can we misuse these technologies of control to create something that's more poetic or critical, something that allows people to feel a sense of relationship with their city and that their intimate vital signs can be grown to the size of a whole city. So fast forward to the Kemper and let's talk about what we are premiering. So we are premiering a work called Pulse Topology. Pulse Topology, contrary to Paul's room, is not got hundreds, but thousands of light bulbs. We're talking of 3,000 light bulbs suspended from the ceiling, taking over the entirety of the exhibition space. It's difficult to see in this video, but each one of those little light bulbs is flickering with the heartbeat of a different participant. That flicker unique because each light bulb is representing one single recording. The idea is to create kind of like the mountains and valleys that you saw in Pulse Spiral, but create a more immersive work, a topology that invites you to read the space as if you're walking through a field of fireflies that sometimes sync up. The work in this case is made with not tungsten filament light bulbs. So if you guys know me, you will know that I've for a long time hated LED lights. I detest them. I think that they're a blight and that they are destroying our cities because all cities are looking like Reno, Nevada as we color change them with LED lights. However, I had to eat crow, I think is the experience or the expression in English, because finally there is a new kind of LED filament light bulb, which is what this is, which is actually using very little power, and it does do a very reasonable job at having that sense of the tungsten filament that you get in an incandescent light bulb. So the sensor is this. It's a little suspended camera. It's a photoplethysmography sensor that measures slight changes in the coloration of your skin. And as this happens, the light bulbs that are close to you start beating to your own heartbeat. And then gradually more and more of these light bulbs become controlled by your heartbeat. You can't hear it so well. Well, maybe if I shut up, you will. You can hear the heartbeat of, I believe this is Aaron, in the room. But of course, when you visit it live, you'll be able to see it more closely, how this looks, how this sounds. So if no one's participating, you're basically hearing the past heartbeats of the past 3,000 participants. But as soon as you put your hand under any of these three sensors, your heartbeat starts getting beamed up to the lights above.
Yep.
And so this is the sensor again, and this is what happens as you put your hand underneath. Photoplethysmography is a very old technology that is usually used, you know, I don't know, at airports to see if people have their heartbeat. Here you can see the lights exactly over the participant start beaming to her heartbeat and slowly, gradually taking over the full topology. Here we've developed it so that it's a nice bright light. It means that all coloring, like all pigmentation of skin can work. That's a very important thing because oftentimes these technologies are mostly trained on white bodies. It's important to test it on everybody. And so we're happy to say it works on all skin colorations. The fact that this kind of sensing, the sensing is done remotely, just with this camera analysis, to me is really beautiful because it's almost as if we're emanating information from our body, and that these lights are picking it up. In a minute, I will show you how that system actually works, but just some more shots from the room at the Kemper. We think of it as infection of light bulbs. It just takes over the whole space. And in the future, as we show this work elsewhere, we will take over different sized rooms. We will create labyrinths. We seek to create almost like a Ariadne's thread, like labyrinth, where you're finding yourself inside of all of this. It reminds me of the precedence of this project. This project is inspired by a Mexican movie called Macario, which is a movie from 1960, in which the protagonist has a hunger-induced hallucination in a cave where he sees everybody in the world who's alive represented by a little flickering candle. So in a way, this project is like a contemporary version of Macario, where every single one of these light bulbs is someone who has tried the work before. The project also is inspired by the work of Arturo Rosenbluth. It's a Mexican cardiologist who worked with Norbert Wiener in the 1930s to explain self-regulation in the heart. That theory, which was born in the Mexican Institute of Cardiology, was actually giving rise to cybernetics. And cybernetics, in my opinion, is the most important idea of the 20th century. So few people know that cybernetics is born out of trying to understand self-regulation of the heart, the theory of messages and communication as the way to understand how the heart self-regulates. And so there is a relationship between interaction, about feedback systems, but also this kind of desire to compute the biological systems. I'm going to fast forward to a video that we were doing of the setup. So this is the, again, just the heartbeat taking over from the sensor. And this is what the system does. So it searches for your hand, and then it measures small differences. It does an electrocardiogram based on tiny differences in the coloration of your skin. If you put a sweater, or if you put your knee or a toy, you may still see some variations in the coloration. And so it may fire. But the piece itself is meant to record. If you put your hand or your cheek, then you will see that flow of blood will actually change that coloration. And that's what we're detecting with this system. And this photoplethysmography is normally used, when you put that little clip along in the doctor's office. That's the same type of technology. This shows you a little bit of the software that Stefan programmed. So on the bottom of that three-dimensional representation, you see the sphere taking over more of the activity, so of the light bulbs. And now on the top right, you see another sphere emerging because there's a second participant. And so they're starting to control the light bulbs gradually and slowly. And then when they disappear, when you stop using the sensor, the spheres contract and they pick one light bulb to put your heartbeat into it. And so think of this as a constant expansion and contraction of the heartbeat of the person, almost as if it were some kind of aura taking over, and these fireflies all sync up. And then when you disappear, then your heartbeat recording goes to a different light bulb chosen at random from inside of the sphere. The idea with this artwork is that it's never repeating the same patterns, right? They're constantly changing because people are adding their heartbeats as they go. So this is just a couple of images of what it looked like during installation. This is why I was thanking William so profusely, because we're talking about miles and miles of electrical cable. It's important to note that this light bulbs that we're using here are they're special light bulbs. They actually have a constant current driver. So one of the reasons I've always hated LEDs is because they don't dim beautifully. But these ones are engineered to have a pulse width modulation that is very finely tuned to control the constant current. And those are the slides that I have. I want to make sure that I leave a little bit of time in case there are some comments or some questions as part of this. I want to say that at a time when we've been asked to be away from each other, social distancing and masking and no contact, no hugs, more than ever, I think we need to hear the words of the great American composer Frederick Chevsky, who spoke about art's most important objective being coming together. How can we use art? How can we interrupt the normal narratives of our daily life to come together, to have this opportunity to have a shared experience? I think that now that you guys are very well vaccinated, fortunately, and you're going to have your second shot, I hear that the U.S. is lagging a little bit on the adoption of the second vaccine, but please get doubly vaccinated to be properly vaccinated. So as we enter a world in which we're vaccinated, we need to be very, very ambitious about coming together, creating community, and sharing experience. I often speak about what's invisible, right? What's invisible is a tiny little virus that is a planetary problem. And as Buckminster Fuller said, the great American architect, planetary problems need planetary solutions. And sadly, in countries such as my own, in Mexico, there's nationalism, Brazil, a disaster, Russia, a disaster. In terms of how we deal with this, we need to deal with this scientifically. I'm proud to be in Canada, where we now have the highest vaccination rate in the whole world. Sorry if I'm laying it on thick on the vaccination front, but I am a scientist and I do believe in facts. And I do believe that even if it is invisible, the virus is there. The virus has killed 4 million people. So the evidence of it and its devastation is for anyone to just see. Go and talk to a nurse in the front lines or to a doctor and tell them you're not going to get vaccinated. That is brutal. We need to be a bit more using our brain and the evidence of science to accept that we are part of the solution too by taking our vaccines. Now, in case you thought that that was a moralistic tale that has nothing to do with the show, I can say the same thing about the heartbeat. The heartbeat is invisible, but it's the first sound we hear. When we're in the womb of our mothers, the very, very first sound we hear is not even our own heartbeat, is your mother's heartbeat, right? Then you hear your own. And let me tell you a story about what happened when my wife was pregnant with twins. In 2006, she was pregnant with twins, and I learned that the echography, the ultrasound machine, could let you eavesdrop and hear the sound of the fetus. And because I'm a nerd, I asked the doctors to bring 2 ultrasound machines. And I actually wanted to hear simultaneously the heartbeat of the boy and the heartbeat of the girl inside of the womb. And guess what, you guys? The heartbeats were completely different. It was like this syncopated rhythm. And it is from here that I thought, let's make this visible. Let's make it tangible. And let's create a symphony out of all of these arrhythmic patterns. So sometimes when I think about this Pulse series, I think of it in terms of minimalist music like Conlon Nancaro or Steve Reich or Philip Glass, or, you know, this kind of repetitive sequences that are out of phase and then create something grander than the individual rhythm. That's what I think is happening in Pulse Topology. I don't know, because I haven't been to Kansas City to see it. But if you're watching this from Kansas City, what I'd like you to do is, when you go, you know, tweet, say, or send an Instagram post and say, Rafael, this thing is working. Tell me if you like it. Is it loud enough? Is it not loud enough? I'm asking everybody on this call to be quality control. I trust Aaron, I trust William and everybody, but I need to hear from the people. So if you go down, you think that this is a meritorious piece, just send an Instagram and label it so that we can see it. And then hopefully in a couple of weeks, this horrible pandemic will be at a point where I can travel and see it myself, but I depend on you to give me feedback until then. So thank you very much for paying attention to this presentation. I would love if there's any questions, this would be a good time to ask them. Oh, I see that there are some questions, right? Hey,
It's me. I'm gonna ask the questions in order for you.
thank you.
The first question is, how many people can view at one time?
Okay, well, that's actually up to health and safety. So I believe, Aaron, maybe that's a question for you. I believe that you guys are doing a timed entry. Is that true?
We're doing a timed entry for the opening, and then we do have timed entry throughout the hours that the museum's open. In terms of the capacity of this particular gallery, I'm not exactly sure of that number, but several people can view the work at one time. There are 3 sensors available for people to put their hand under. So at any one time, 3 people can be activating the piece, but many other people can be viewing the piece.
And may I say that one thing that's pretty, I like it when people are adding their heartbeats. I like it more when several people are doing it simultaneously, because it's almost like a neural firing engram, you know, because the people who are close to sensor A sort of take some bulbs, and then B comes in, and there's a little bit of a give or take. I also like it when no one's participating, because it just becomes more like a starry night. It just becomes like a reminder of people in the past. I think that art at a time after COVID is good to help us remember, you know, it's good to help us mourn losses. There's a lot of mourning going on, but it also helps us to signal continuity, right? Like new heartbeats arrive and this piece just keeps on changing. So both of those things are at work, mourning and continuity in the work.
Thank you. Another question is, could you speak a bit more about your staff? It's fascinating to have people in other countries working with you. And I would also imagine, to add to that question, I would imagine as an artist working with people from different disciplines, given that you originally come from working in a different discipline as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I have a chemistry degree, and here's the deal. When I graduated from university, I joined a group called Pomokomo. There were composers and choreographers and musicians and so on. And those people had real talent, right? Like they had a specialty. There's people who can write beautifully, or people who can have a beat. I had no talent to pursue a métier, like a specialty in the arts. But what I did notice is that because I didn't have talent, I was best outside of the stage where everything was happening. I kind of became the director. And I realized that if anything, if I can do something more or less well, is connecting different specialties, to be interstitial. I'm kind of like a ferret that moves around the different layers. And I put together teams of people that will help us develop a project like this. So I'm very lucky at Antimodular, which is a studio in Montreal. As I was saying, we have 15, 16 full-time developers. They come from 7 countries. And for me, what's important is that the engineering types or scientific types want to be artists, and that the artist types want to be scientists or engineers. I think that this confusion is very productive. I also think that more and more studios are going to be like mine. In other words, interdisciplinary. They're going to be studios where credits are paid, where credits are due. And the image of the artist by him or herself in front of a canvas looking for inspiration is not that it's gone. I mean, there's people who have that talent, and I respect that very much. I just notice with concern that many of my friends, many of people who are working in teams are not acknowledging those teams, and that's not okay. So this is yet again an opportunity to mention that this work is done in collaboration with a whole bunch of people who I admire, respect, and pay well.
Thank you. If one does a dozen jumping jack exercise, will that show in the heart light?
Absolutely, it will. And in fact, we have this very
I'm
often.
not doing demos, just so you know.
Yeah, don't worry. But if you run around and then you put it on, it'll go boom, 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 boom. But can I suggest an alternative to that? Because a lot of people do that, especially kids. The more interesting to do is to take a deep breath and to meditate and to try and control your heartbeat and slow it down, because there's nothing more pleasant than a slow heart. Like, slow heart is a sign of health. Like most great sports people, they have a slower heartbeat. And so when you are in the artwork and you hear a slow heartbeat, it calms you down. Like, you as the visitor just hear this heartbeat. Like, so try this. Go to the show with someone who you know has a slow heartbeat or is a real sports person, and let them breathe and concentrate, and you will see that their calmness, it is infectious. Then also, another thing that the system can detect is arrhythmia. So it's awful. This is awful. Like, what people with arrhythmia have to live with is very disturbing for people who have never had it. So the system does try to find a good waveform to avoid the arrhythmias, but sometimes you can hear them, and it's not pretty. I should say, this system is not top of the line cardiac sensor, right? Like, if you're worried about your heart, you should go to the hospital, you should go to your doctor. This is an artwork, right? It's extracting as much as it can information from your coloration of your skin. It doesn't get it right all the time, but we're comfortable with that. We're artists. This is really about the symbolic, not about the clinical.
Mm-hmm. One question is, I understand that 300 people are necessary to activate the full 300 LED. How can this be achieved with limited attendance in the gallery?
So what we did, this is a great question. Thank you for that. So we have 3,000 heartbeats, not 300. So here's what we did. To start, we needed some heartbeats because we have Aaron's heart and Will's heart and Stefan's heart and whatever, but the computer was already pre-populated with heartbeats from our previous shows. The shows that we've used in the past, like for example, the Hirschhorn show where we showed Pulse Room, we have the remaining heartbeats from there. And then we have the heartbeats from our show in Madrid and from our show in Mexico. So as you go to the Kemper to see the work in Kansas City, you're actually seeing heartbeats from all over the world where we have used these heartbeats. Gradually, as more participants come through, those heartbeats will become more and more coming from the Midwest. And so eventually, when this work goes somewhere else, I think it's going next to Toronto, all the heartbeats from Kansas City will populate initially the Toronto version of the work, and then gradually it'll be recycling. So that's a great question. Thank you.
And can you talk a little bit more as well about this in any way or not capturing one's identity in the process? There was mention of fingerprint scanners in your previous work, and some conversation about you capturing data of individuals and some of their identity related to capturing that data. So I was wondering if you could
sure.
talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so at the studio, we really like to misuse technology away from the original intent of those technologies. So we have long used biometric technologies such as fingerprint scanners. The fingerprint was invented in the 19th century by an Argentinian police officer called Juan Vucetich, who first used it for forensic and criminal investigation. The fingerprint now, of course, is what we use routinely to get access to our phone or even our country. So this fingerprinting and the idea of a biometric signature clearly is something that's articulated in a society of control. For me, working with the fingerprint is not optional, or is not new, or is not innovative. It's like I said, the fingerprint is 19th century. So to use these technologies to create pieces that are connective is a challenge that I'm interested in. The piece that the person is referring to is called Pulse Index, because it's the index finger that we're measuring. And Pulse Index does do a scan of your heartbeat and your fingerprint, and then it shows it in a tableau of 10,000 fingerprints. The idea is that there's degree to which this is an anonymity, because we don't know your name, we don't know who you are, we don't keep any record other than the uniqueness of your fingerprint. And then the spirit of this kind of work is to create a landscape out of a portrait. So in other words, we take your unique identifier and then we join it with 10,000 others. We create a quilt-like landscape of it. And that never before has the landscape idea been as well expressed as in Paul's topology, because it's a landscape, a three-dimensional, topology of represented individuals. So anonymity matters to me. I do work, though, always right at the boundary between the seduction of participation, of selfies, reality TV, being a part of something, and then the violence of tracking and capturing. For me, no technology is innocent. When you think about, oh, this is done with the internet. Well, the internet came from a DARPA Pentagon-funded project in the 60s for communications and control in the battlefield. So there is no such thing as, oh, technology is neutral. Technologies are imbued with our prejudices. And the key is to acknowledge those prejudices and, to the maximum extent of your ability, try to propose more poetic or critical ways to misuse those technologies, as we're doing here. So this is really a society of metrics is an inevitable situation. And I think if we want to speak about these technologies, we must use them. The alternative of not using them at all was tried by Pol Pot, and it didn't really work. So we cannot see ourselves without technology. Average American watches 8 hours of screen time a day, whether it's a phone or an internet or TV. So what would we be like without this screen? We don't know, because everybody is in on it, right? And so I think that to investigate technology is to investigate ourselves. And that's my kind of stance when people ask, well, what about privacy and so on? It's like, well, we're not collecting data to send to the man. We are sending it to some light bulbs, which then will erase that data as more recordings come along.
Thank you. I have one final question, and
It's over. What? I have lots of tea here still.
well, we'd love to hear you talk more about some of your projects. Maybe
I have 3 or 4 hours.
Maybe this will elicit another question, but I know we just finished this, and I know it was a major project, but I would imagine with a team of such sophisticated individuals from Anti-Modular and, bouncing all over the place with these incredible ideas, I wonder, what are you working on now, or what can you tell us that you're thinking about?
So pretty much the work that we're doing at the studio is mostly about atmospherics. We call it, there's so many traditions of atmospheric art, like sky art or asphyxiation art. And we are concerned with the biosphere, right? Because ultimately we are parents, and we note with concern that there's another invisible problem. It's called 421 parts per million of carbon dioxide. No human in the history of this planet has ever had to breathe 421 parts per million of carbon dioxide, and the situation is getting worse and worse by the day. We are living a planetary extinction event. Every 3 minutes, a new species of a living being disappears forever, because we are destroying the planet. And it's very important, I think, to think about the atmosphere, yes, as the place where our voice and our singing can come in, but it's also the site where our toxicity is reaching a point where the future of our kids is in question. This is not dramatic. This is the actual data. This is not an opinion. This is 99.9% of the scientists looking at the evidence. So if you look at the evidence, it seems like as artists, we have a challenge to think about this invisible problem, which is climate change. and make it visible, make it tangible, make us aware of our own footprint. How can we relate to natural systems in a way other than dominance and extractivism and destruction? So it sounds naive and it sounds a bit hippie, but that's exactly what we need. We need right now for all the bright minds, in my opinion, to throw their 2 cents about what to do about the atmosphere that wants to kill us. So about not taking it for granted. Did you all watch that movie featuring John Travolta, I believe, where he was like some immunosuppressed boy who lived in a bubble? Well, that's us. 7 billion people in this planet is John Travolta living in that bubble. And with every car, with every extractivist or fossil fuel burning, we're making that bubble more toxic. I think that this is the question that interests the studio the most, right? Like, how do we, contribute? How do we become less complicit with that? But also, how do we, like I said, make it tangible? Come to terms with the commons, come to terms with our responsibilities. So a lot of the work we're doing are sculptures, or we have an asphyxiation machine that is going to be shown in San Francisco soon, that makes you aware of the atmosphere as the site of an intense battle right now for the future of this planet.
I think it's such an important thing.
It sounded awful, though. I'm sorry if I sound messianic. It's more like, hey, there's climate change. Like, shouldn't we try and do something about it? That's more the spirit than the messianic thing. I apologize.
But I think one point to remember too in all the work is that the things that are invisible, you are in a way making those things visible, so that we can't do anything but think about them, right? We can come at them with these kind of you can come at it where you're at. When I come in here, sometimes I feel like it's so calm and I can kind of enjoy myself and want to sort of relax in the space, like you said, in terms of meditation. But also, it's thinking about the heart and the heartbeat and all of the kind of any and all developments in heart transplant science and technology, and thinking about where that's come. So I think I'm thinking about these things because we will be inviting people that we work with at the museum over the course of the exhibition to come in, and whatever experience they've had, whether it's with a heartbeat or whether it's just with going to the Flint Hills and seeing fireflies, those seem like two very disparate things that you can experience or kind of have a visualization of experiencing in the same place. And it reminds me a lot about, the project, your Borderlines project, which is just such an important way to think about how light and sound can come together to kind of really make us imagine things, which I think is something that many of us have gained a little bit back from over COVID perhaps, but also to visualize something that's a tangible thing in which we have to think about, deal with, and in your way, interpret. And so your interpretation of this experience is an exciting one. I think that kind of has a ripple effect, literally and figuratively, as we look at the different sections of the space, which light up like the night sky when you're flying over it, and you're seeing all of these almost like flight patterns, or like you said, synapses in the brain, and thinking about the activity that happens just that we generate with our bodies. And so there's so many interesting intersections and entry points to this particular work. I'm excited for you to see it.
Yeah.
This has been...
Would you do me a favor before we sign off, Erin? Is it possible to take your laptop and show the people how it works? Could you do that? Or is it a desktop computer?
No, I can do that. I have someone can help me do that. I could. I said I wasn't.
Grab your laptop and take it to a sensor.
Okay, here we go.
And then just everybody who's watching, remember that right now the sound is turned off so that we can have this conversation. But the sound, it's a maternal sound, like a bass.
So I'm at this first sensor.
No, but point the camera the other way so that we can see. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. And now
setup.
put your hand under the sensor. The light comes on. And now point the camera to the ceiling, please. Point the camera to the ceiling. The camera to the ceiling. Tilted. Yeah, like that. Oh, okay, but there's lights on in the room. Okay, well, that big fat light, you guys, normally it's not there. But you can see that now. This is Aaron's heartbeat. Are you a sports person?
I am.
Yeah, you can tell, like boom, 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 boom. So now this is Aaron's heart in it. And then as you release it, it gradually contracts back to taking over only part of it. Thank you so much, Aaron. I really appreciate that.
Get people to do that. I said I wasn't going to do a demo.
Yeah, but I couldn't help myself. It's really, I think it's really more beautiful when you walk through it, because as you walk through it, it reveals itself with all the nooks and crannies. So
it does. I definitely would encourage people to see this. It's been one of the interesting thing is all of the exciting adaptations, not only that are implied and sort of inserted into the project themselves, but working remotely in such a way to make such a large presentation hasn't been something that we've done. So I have to say, like, I learned so much from this exhibition, and I know that my team did here, as well as many other arts organizations that have helped us with this. So
and I also want to say, I want to mention, sorry to interrupt you, the whole thing about COVID, because we were delayed like a couple of weeks, and that's, you guys, because there's a massive shipping collapse worldwide, and we needed to get components and so on. So apologies for that delay. As a Mexican and Canadian, I want to be punctual. I love it when things open at just on time to break all stereotypes. But you know, it's COVID times. We think that the wait will be worth it. And I really thank you, Aaron. This has been a journey. I think that tonight is the opening, right? Like in an hour or so?
Yes.
Is that what's happening? Okay, so let me know how it goes. And I thank you and thank everybody who joined the call. And I hope that you can see this work life either in Kansas City or as it tours the world.
Exactly. Thank you. And,
I want to say, sorry. Sorry. Like one last thing. I want to say that it's rich to have some privileged person talk about the environment and then use, 15 kilometers of cables and 3,000 light bulbs and so on and so forth. So I just want to mention that I'm not unaware of the complicity that I have with the system. So it's not like I'm pretending I'm pure and I have the answers. I don't want to come out as somebody who is saying something and doing something else. I'm aware of the contradictions that it is to work in media art. And in my defense, this artwork is using less power than a vacuum cleaner. And it's all a question of, well, where do we spend some of this power? And in this particular piece, I think that, we're trying to elevate the discussion about it.
I appreciate you saying that, because I think that one of the things that my team and myself are looking forward to is continuing to collaborate with your team on all of the elements that happened on the ground here, the things we couldn't participate in with together. So it'll be nice to have that post conversation about things and just kind of see how Pulse continues to move forward. Well, thank you, Rafael. I hope you have a wonderful, I know you're on vacation, so we really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for joining. Please sign up. The exhibition will be open for quite some time, and we also have some fantastic programming in conjunction with it as well. So we hope you'll join us. Thank you.
Bye.